Who are you people?
Witch.
Angel.
Mermaid.
So, I included this on my list of 25 favourite episodes, and I think it was the first I hadn't already done a video on, so here we go.
Phoebe's a mermaid.
Oh.
A Witch's Tale is the two-part premiere to Charmed Season 5, airing as one entity in the initial run and being included as such on the DVD box set. God, I'm old. It's been a few weeks since the Halliwell sisters turned down the Angel of Destiny's offer to give up their magic, Piper found out she was pregnant, and Cole showed signs of returning from the demonic wasteland. Demon attacks have been light at the moment, allowing Phoebe to really take off as an advice columnist, getting her own billboards, an interview with Nancy O'Dell, and her own car for the first time in the series. Piper and Leo likewise have been preparing the house for the baby, turning their closet into a nursery, and Leo giving Piper some really badly worded advice on slowing down.
Like I said, you're a lot like your mother.
Paige has also been throwing herself into witch duties, which somehow extends to...
I mean, look at your hair. It's still red from the potion you blew up last night.
I guess it doesn't count as personal gain if it's an accident. Fun fact, the WB was feeling particularly paranoid after Felicity's ratings plummeted, blaming it on Kerry Russell's admittedly terrible haircut, and stating that no young stars could change their hair without permission from the higher-ups. Rose McGowan impulsively dyed hers red during hiatus, and when the enraged people in suits demanded to know how they would explain this on screen, she responded, "It's a show about magic. You simply say I was mixing a potion and it exploded in my face. My hair turned red and I liked it, so I kept it." But back to the goings-on in San Fran, we're also introduced to a young woman called Miley, who has fallen for a young man called Craig. She loves him and needs to know that he feels the same way for some reason. Twist, Miley's a mermaid who made a deal with the sea hags that she'd have 30 days to win a mortal's love or else she'd give up her immortality. Does this remind anyone of a certain famous mermaid story that was adapted into a Disney film where one of the Charmed cast members served as the visual inspiration for Ariel?
Disney drew Ariel's face from pictures of me.
Anyway, the sea hag isn't above sabotaging the deal, since she made one herself with a skeletal being called Necron, who isn't named after the Greek word for dead by coincidence. He's eternally between life and death and needs to consume an immortal creature's essence to put an end to that. In a callback to the spell to track the Banshee in Look Who's Barking, Paige writes a spell to find the sea hag that ends up turning Phoebe into a mermaid. And despite vanquishing the hag and getting Miley the L word, Phoebe decides she wants to stay in the ocean forever. Part 2 is all about saving her from Necron and convincing her to return home, which won't be easy, since Cole returns fully with more demonic powers and being invulnerable. Plus some stuff about Piper trying to overcompensate for her newfound fears, and Paige juggling Charmed One responsibilities with a sudden promotion to full-time social worker. So this episode is actually quite controversial among fans, or at least marks a turn towards things attracting more controversy. Krista Vernoff, who had been a story editor, co-producer and writer on the show since season 3, cited this as the episode that made her choose not to renew her contract at the end of season 6. It was not the first to feature a Halliwell sister being transformed into a magical creature, and was more in spirit with the likes of Look Who's Barking and Hell Hath No Fury, where the transformation was at least partly monstrous. But Phoebe's mermaid costume was considerably more sexualized, and despite it making sense in universe, which I'll get to, a ratings spike led to the network demanding repeats of the same format, resulting in Phoebe's tacky Cinderella dress, the degrading belly dancer outfit, Paige's see-through nymph costume, and all three sisters being turned into superheroes, Greek goddesses, and Valkyries. There's the genie costume as well, but that one was more obviously played for comedy.
And why do I always get stuck with the wig?
Season 5 likewise was also the first one produced without any involvement from Constance M. Burge, who had been showrunner for the first 2 seasons and executive consultant for the 3rd and 4th. At one point, Nell Scovell, who had been showrunner for our beloved Sabrina the Teenage Witch, was set to take over from the dreaded Brad Kern, but after being humiliated by him in the writer's room, chose to leave. As a result, the show's tone shifted quite noticeably starting with this episode and season.
We need to go.
Well, yeah!
The sea hag attacked my tail.
Make it go away!
While lighter fantasy elements had always been a part of the main series, such as fairies appearing in season 3, and an episode with fairy tale motifs in season 4, this saw them coming to the forefront. And mermaids would soon be followed by wood nymphs, leprechauns, sandmen, unicorns, elves, etc. And while I'm personally fine with most of those elements, you can't deny that it does feel like a different show.
The call of the sea is intense. just like Miley said it was.
Brad Kern's influence was also reflected in the characterization of the sisters themselves, who would always prioritize protecting innocence above all else. And while they'd wrestled with how magic interfered in their lives, they would always come through to help them. The complaints about the sisters becoming more outwardly selfish and cruel started here, even if the episode itself introduces these themes intentionally to examine them and ultimately refute them.
Who are you people, and what have you done with my sisters?
Piper, for example, is now pregnant and is initially determined to still pull her weight as a charmed one, but Leo's attempts at cautioning her leads to her catastrophizing and worrying about what might happen if she dies fighting demons and leaves her children without a mother, like what happened with Patty. And for added trauma, these thoughts surface while having to deal with a water-themed enemy.
It killed Mom.
Actually, I've never got on Piper's case for wanting a normal life as much as a lot of fans do, mostly because it's fully understandable for her to want a life separate from magic, and she also gets moments like this.
Innocents are always gonna get hurt.
I know, Leo, but it's a little bit different when we're aware of it.
And it's very clear that she won't turn her back on helping innocent people. I really feel for her in this episode in particular. Firstly, because her catastrophizing is oh so relatable. I freak out about bad things happening if I book my haircut for 12:30 instead of 12. And second, I remember watching this interview with Megan Fox, talking about all the new fears that come with being a mother, and I literally thought of Piper in this episode the second I watched it.
Every room I walk into, I look for everything that could possibly go wrong. If there's an earthquake, what's gonna fall off of the wall?
I don't plan on ever becoming a parent, sorry girls, but I get it. And I don't imagine it's much of a picnic when you throw being a charmed one into the mix. For what it's worth, Piper gets it too. She knows she messed up and wants to not freeze when the next demon attacks, but like many of us, wants the quick fix as opposed to doing the long, strenuous work and living with her fear, so she casts the Fearless spell.
You told me to get rid of my fear, so that's what I did.
Yes, but you didn't get rid of it, you just suppressed it.
I'm going to be charitable to her because, Leo, bruh, your advice is f***ing terrible. And maybe I haven't watched as much TV as I think I have, but I can't remember ever seeing another show tackle these kinds of themes.
I'm supposed to be stronger than ever now that I'm pregnant for our daughter and my sisters. It's my job to take care of this family.
As opposed to, say, the tangible threats that Once Upon a Time's villains pose to children, this touches on the fear of the unknown, and panic over the uncertainty of the future that accompanies every parent-to-be. The matter of demonic fighting while pregnant is solved conveniently at the end, when the unborn Wyatt has the power to heal Piper from the womb, but of course that was more likely motivated by the desire to not sideline the lead witch of the female empowerment show for an entire season. And it would open up interesting sources of conflict for Piper in this season, as she has to deal with the usual pregnancy stuff with these added supernatural twists.
This, bitch! Oh, bad baby.
Season 5 has a lot to criticize, but there are some very solid elements to it. Next, sister?
I don't want to fight it. I just want to be free.
It has come to my attention that people think I may have been a bit too hard on Phoebe in Season 5, especially considering all she went through in Season 4. So I'm going to approach this episode with a lot more empathy and compassion.
All that for a guy? Boy, did you get taken for a ride.
Oh good god, kill it with fire! Well, in a few episodes, this was meant to be a sad scene. You have an innocent who physically came to you for help and is being targeted by an all-powerful demon that can literally cause hurricanes and tidal waves, or would if the budget was higher, and not only do you mock her for her life choices, but you complain that having to save someone's life is a massive inconvenience to you, and then criticize the pregnant sister you offloaded your responsibility onto for understandably messing up? See you next Tuesday, freebie. But in fairness, we're not meant to approve of her attitude here. The whole mermaid transformation is designed to knock her down a peg and force her to confront what she's not addressing, and she basically has to be humbled in order to turn back human at the end of part 2. And it will come as an even bigger surprise that I actually relate a lot to Phoebe here.
Swim in the open sea all day, explore endless wonders. It's pure freedom.
Okay, I had the excuse of being 14 and quite miserable, so he won't hold me as accountable, since I didn't go around assaulting my exes with letter openers or trying to avoid people who came to me for help. But through a combination of really awful bullying at school and having to care for my grandmother while she was dying of lung cancer, as well as the usual teenage hormones, this episode's plot of Phoebe just wanting to jump into the sea and escape all her problems really hit home. and it's definitely where my fascination with mermaid mythology came from. I mean, it soon became a weekly ritual to swim for an hour every Saturday to at least pretend it was possible to escape the real world for a bit, and I was one of the 2 people that actually liked the Atlantica level in Kingdom Hearts for the same reason. And I ended up watching way more of H2O Just Add Water than I would have dared admit at the time. But like many guys my age, we had one of 3 ready-made reasons to justify said watching, and Ricky was mine. And a couple of years ago, I made a video analysing how the mermaid characters in Splash, Aquamarine and The Little Mermaid paralleled a person with autism trying to navigate the world, so we can retroactively give Charmed the credit for piquing my interest. I think the overall appeal of mermaids is definitely escapism, at least for me anyway. The idea of being able to swim indefinitely and explore the ocean in a way regular humans can't. Most people wanted to move to a log cabin in the mountains. I wanted to jump in the ocean and swim all day. But it's funny how Charmed uses the mermaid to parallel an anti-escapism moral.
It was a great life for the first few hundred years.
Despite being a more positive transformation than the Fury or the Banshee, it's still unwanted, and serves to tempt Phoebe away from her destiny. Miley states that the freedom that comes with being a mermaid is ultimately worthless because they can't find love in the sea. And of course, Phoebe is the most love-obsessed of the sisters, so her remaining a mermaid would be a betrayal of her true nature. And I'm well on board with the message that you can't run away from your problems or your feelings, and you do have to address them if you want to move on. And this scene between Cole and Phoebe is beautiful, where she comes clean and finally states her intentions civilly and without her usual abusive gusto.
I do love you, and I always will.
If only this had been where it ended, or this had set the tone for what was to follow. But by Happily Ever After and Siren Song, Phoebe is back to demonizing him, and the show cannot make up its mind on what we're supposed to take away. This was also where the planned affair between Cole and Paige was to start, as Paige's spell here was going to have him kiss her while under the influence, but of course Rose McGowan and Julian McMahon protested and the story was dropped. Speaking of Paige, a lot of fans come down pretty hard on the idea that she chooses to leave her job at the end of the 2-parter to focus on just being a witch. But as always, I get it.
I'm gonna keep helping people. I just don't want to split my focus anymore.
Paige was already in this industry by the time her powers were awakened, and she wanted to become a social worker specifically to help people. But if she's juggling helping people at opposite ends of the spectrum, she's not going to be much help to anyone. And since she eventually has to become a full-time white lighter as well, she is still helping people and doing what she would have done as a social worker if she hadn't been a witch. The Lost Picture Show spells it out when she considers becoming one again.
Why do you need a job? You're a witch, a white lighter.
A white lighter basically is a supernatural social worker anyway, and we'd seen Paige favouring helping people the magical way in episodes like Hell Hath No Fury and Charmed and Dangerous, so even in an uneven season like the 5th, this feels like a logical character progression. She likely also wanted the freedom to be able to wear clothes like this all day. We can at least hand it to them for not stretching believability about these outfits in the workplace past 2 episodes. Moving on to the superficial stuff, I gotta say, I really love the Sea Hag.
Rise up from the sea. Find the one who fled from thee.
She has these cool powers over anything water-related, including the weather, and undoubtedly would have got to do a lot more if the show's budget was higher. But even so, a big plus about Season 5 is first in how memorable all these Demons of the Week are, and second in the production values. The Sea Hag's cave is a very cool set, and we get some fun underwater shots of Phoebe as a mermaid. Necron isn't as intriguing as the Sea Hag, but he's a serviceable baddie with an interesting design, and it's pretty cool that he can't just be vanquished like a regular demon, without the risk of taking the sisters with him.
Actually, the only 2 that vanquished him died in the process.
And the Vanquish itself is pretty spectacular. But of course, my favourite moment in the whole 2-parter is Phoebe's slow-motion jump out of the water to kill the Sea Hag with the auger shell. And the reason this 2-parter works for me in the way that episodes like The Mummy and Leprechauns 1 don't, is that even though it is lighter and dabbling in fantasy, there is still some of that classic Charmed spookiness that makes it feel like a proper episode of the same show. So yeah, that's A Witch's Tale. For better or worse, it marked the start of Charmed's new direction, although I'll lean slightly more towards better, since there is still plenty to love about the later seasons. For years, I remember watching the 2-parter over and over again, thinking that the mermaid concept had potential for a show in its own right. And what do you know? In 2005, Brad Kern had developed a pilot for a show titled Mermaid involving a similar formula of a mermaid called Nikki living a double life in Miami. Due to the merger between the WB and UPN networks, the resulting CW passed on the pilot, which had also abruptly had its budget cut and therefore lower production values. A year after A Witch's Tale, there was also an attempted pilot for a show about 3 mermaid sisters titled Mermaids that feels like if Charmed and H2O Just Add Water had a baby, but it's a decent watch as a standalone movie.
Siren says you won't remember any of this tomorrow.
Remember what?
We would also get a darker take on mermaid mythology in 2018 called Siren, which I still struggle to get past the 4th episode of, but points for effort. Oh, and despite Alyssa Milano being terrified of water, she considers this her favourite episode, and it's not hard to see why. It also finishes with the absolute best use of Bewitched's Blame It on the Weatherman that you will ever get in anything, ever.